Welcome back. Once again, my name is Odell Horn. I'm the president of the North Georgia Conference United Methodist Men, and I'm here with Garry Ingraham, who is the executive director of Transforming Congregations, as well as sister ministry, Love and Truth Network. And Garry has been talking to us about healing from sexual trauma. Gary's going to summarize what he's talked about in the first part, and then he's going to have a couple questions for him. Then he's going to move into the second part of this video. Thank you, Garry, again for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Oh, thanks, Odell. Again, great to be with you. So just quickly, we talked about the reality of the prevalence of sexual abuse, not just of women, or girls, but also of boys. That it really is statistically a very, very serious issue. That 1 in 4 boys, or sorry, 1 in 6 boys will have been sexually abused by the time he reaches 18 years of age. And so that's a massive issue. And then I went into quite a bit of detail, kind of a top level detail, I guess, on some of the possible effects. There are many others than what I mentioned, but some of the possible effects that stem from sexual abuse and result in sexual trauma that we can experience throughout our lifetime if not dealt with.
So you mentioned about re-victimization as an adult.
Right.
How can Christians avoid, in the process of trying to heal their friend or their church member who has been sexually abused, how can we avoid re-victimizing them?
That's a great question, and that could easily, frankly, that could be a summit or a training all in and of itself. So let me just take a stab at a few key points, I think, that involve how to best help to not re-victimize someone who's gone through trauma. Now, let's understand the difference between experiencing the pain of trauma, which might have been shut down right after the event of trauma. The person might have just disconnected from that, stuffed it, did preoccupied themselves with other things, even as a child, a young child, and avoided the pain of that. And when they start as an adult, when they begin to unpack that and realize, oh, this is something that I really do need to deal with, then there is going to be a great deal of pain that comes up with that. So first, so I want to just say, let's not confuse a person's pain for being re-victimized. And also, one of the ways that we can be a real gift to a person is to give them simply the gift of our presence. And oftentimes they don't need words. Sometimes as Christians, we feel uncomfortable. We do, not just sometimes. I think we all do, unless we've done a lot of work in this area. We feel really uncomfortable with our own pain, and we feel uncomfortable with other people's pain, and we just want to make it go away. We want to solve the problem. I'd say, especially as guys, we just want to solve the problem. And honestly, that is a way of re-victimizing somebody that oftentimes, as I said earlier, that many, many times kids were either not believed, they were not heard. And and if they didn't even tell anyone, one of the reasons they didn't tell anyone is because they didn't have the kind of relationship. That doesn't mean that they didn't have a good relationship with both mom and dad, or maybe one or the other, but there was something in the relationship where they were fearful about bringing this kind of information to their parent. And so they just stuffed it and tried to move on. And so one of the ways we can re-victimize someone is not letting them tell their story. Let them talk about it if they want to. The flip side of that would be, we can also try to push too soon, or even pushing at all isn't appropriate, but we can try to sometimes want them to get their story out that they may not be ready to tell yet. And so we just need to really be cautious and careful in letting a person bring to the light what they're ready to right then, and so neither deflecting or rejecting their pain or their story, but if they're oftentimes they want they feel very ambivalent. They feel this kind of all this pressure sort of behind this dam that they've held onto so much of their life, and for whatever reason, it's God is putting his finger on it, and it's starting to come up now. And they oftentimes want to tell the story. They oftentimes want a willing ear that's not going to chime in and interrupt constantly, but be attentive to what they're sharing. So I'd say that those would be two things: is being aware of inviting the story to come out if they're ready to, but not pushing them to do that too soon. Another thing would be kind of trivializing the story, or after they've told their story, never bringing it up again. I mean, it can feel shaming to a person who's finally, talked about this, maybe stuff that they themselves have done or stuff that's been done to them, as we're talking about within the context of sexual abuse. They bring it up to somebody, they trust somebody enough to do that, they risk enough to do that, and that other person, because they're so unsure about what they
Mhm.
should or shouldn't do, and they honestly, many of us as Christians don't really want to even hear that stuff, and so we maybe we have our own unprocessed pain, and so we just don't ever bring it up, and that can feel re-victimizing as well. It can feel like, this is what my family always did. I was
Mhm.
abused, and we just pretended that it never happened, and went on. The abuser pretended that it never happened. The abuser lied, when as an adult or as an older child, I brought this into the light and they were confronted on it and they lied, and still, to this day, don't take
Mhm.
ownership of it. And now I'm talking with somebody about it, and apparently this, I was just too much for them. And so that can even be re-victimizing. So I would say we want to, as Christians, especially, be aware of the reality that somebody can easily be re-victimized. Um, Again, I'd say, as a friend, I would be asking, hey, have you been able to meet with someone who can really spend some time with you, and as a Christian counselor, and really unpack some of this stuff with you? And if they never have, I mean, I would be encouraging them to really consider that. I would be finding some resources that I could at least make them aware of, again, in confidence, not ever telling anybody about them. But and that leads to another point, is that when someone is sharing this kind of stuff with us, this is not the thing that you need to call up the prayer chain about, right? I
Okay.
mean, this is not the thing that you should be talking with your husband or your wife about, or 50 of your closest friends. This is the kind of thing, or one, this is the kind of thing that you need to keep your mouth shut about, and you just need to walk with that person. And if you're concerned, if they're getting triggered so strongly that that you're concerned about their how they might harm themselves, then that's a different matter, and that's something that I think we do need to really pay attention to. But ultimately, we need to keep their confidence, and that's another way that people can be re-victimized, is by us not holding their confidence and
Mhm.
blabbing their
Mhm.
story to other people. So, but I'd say the most precious thing we can do, uh, for in this area as well as many others, the most precious thing we can do is give the gift of our presence and the gift of our
Mhm.
ears, more than the gift of our mouth, which is oftentimes not much of a gift.
Mhm. 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 So let me ask you, if you have been one of the 1 in 6 young men
Right.
who were sexually abused or molested before they turned 18, and now there's some sexual confusion, what do you do with the same-sex attractions that you may develop that you didn't have before the sexual abuse?
Right. Yep. That's a great question. And so one of the things I would say, again, I think it's really helpful to find somebody who's a competent, trained Christian counselor in that area of sexual trauma, certainly, but also someone who's dealt with. Ideally, it doesn't necessarily have to be this way, but somebody who's also walked with others through gender identity confusion, perhaps, and just given delivered loving, compassionate talk therapy to the person who has unwanted same-sex attraction and wants to work with a therapist to for their desired outcomes, their own right of self-determination. So I would encourage that for sure. And but in addition to that, I would also, with the background that I have and some of the understanding that I have, I would certainly encourage people that it is not unusual at all to to have a reaction, to have confused reactions, to have on the one hand a real anger, disgust, even hatred for the person who abused you or the people who abused you, and at the same time, and those are things we have to work through. I mean, even the hatred, certainly the unforgiveness, and that can come down the road. I mean, sometime. But there's a very much a way in which my unforgiveness binds me to that person. I don't want that to be the case. And so we want to extend forgiveness and release that person, but it's going to take some time probably to get there, especially when it
Mhm,
comes to sexual
mhm,
trauma. And but I would say again, really learning to walk with people who are going in deep places. The reality is one of the things that we talk a great deal about in our both of our ministries. Again, transforming congregations is specific to the United Methodist Church. Love and Truth Network is to the broader church, regardless of denomination or non-denominational, whatever. But a lot of what we talk about in our ministries is the reality that I think many times within the church we think that there's this tiny select few who are sexually broken, and some feel like, oh, those people, and the truth is, what they don't realize is those people oftentimes are looking you in the mirror in the morning and other times, and
mhm,
oftentimes those people are in your family. Oftentimes you're married to one of those people.
mhm,
You're sitting in the same row with those people at church. You might be
mhm,
looking at that person preaching to you on Sunday morning, who isn't just like my sister-in-law's father, living an egregious life of sin and compromise and hypocrisy, but many who are genuine lovers of Jesus and want to serve him well, but they're dealing with their own brokenness issues and maybe their own sexual abuse as a pastor that they've never actually effectively dealt with, maybe never talked with anybody about it. Now they're a pastor, and part of the reason they're a pastor is they want to serve God, and they were hoping that somehow in that process that whatever wounds they were carrying would be healed. Well, guess what? They just dragged all of that into the ministry. What are we going to do as a church? And so the stuff that I'm talking about, uh, it's not rare. And I know we've already talked about the reality that it's 1 in 6 boys, but that those are ones that are sexually abused. There's plenty of guys and plenty of women who have not been sexually abused, but are totally sexually active, stuck in sexual immorality, stuck in sexual sin, and
mhm,
and as a church, we're not really dealing with those very effectively because we have most of the church lives on this upper level of surface relationships, when in fact what we need are these deeper relationships where we're fully known and fully loved regardless of what we've been through, what we've done, and what's been done to us. And until we get to those places of having those kinds of relationships, then our souls are not satisfied with what's up here. Our souls are hungering for more. And you know what? God designed our souls to hunger for more. And so what the church in large part needs to do, one significant thing we need to do, is press beyond what we're all comfortable with and what we all consider to be proper in terms of dialogue within the church or whatever. And we
mhm,
need to
mhm,
actually break through those boundaries so broken people, which is most of us, 99 point whatever percent of us, broken people, struggling people, that we can finally be known and we can finally stop acting as if, as a community, the church largely has it together with a tiny percentage of people who are really broken.
mhm. Let me say this. I want to clarify when I made this statement about same-sex attraction. I made an assumption that the majority of boys, 1 in 6, who have been sexually abused or molested, the majority were sexually abused or molested by another male as opposed to another female. Is that a true assumption that I made?
So let me just clarify, is the assumption that the majority of men dealing with experiencing same-sex attraction were sexually abused by men? Is that
No, just the boys who have been sexually abused, whether they have same-sex attractions or not. They were majority
yes?
of them were abused by other boys or men as opposed to women and girls.
Yeah, the I don't know. There probably would be some actually scientific research and study around that. Anecdotally, certainly, I believe that it would, by in large part, boys are abused by men or older boys or the same age boys. But it is not. There's also a number of boys who have been sexually abused by women as well. So, but I still think the percentage is probably higher for boys who have experienced sexual abuse by men. And just to clarify what I was, the question that I asked earlier, I think that from my experience with those of us who have experienced same-sex attraction, oftentimes there is a sexual abuse history with guys or older boys in our past, in our experience, but that's not true for everyone. There certainly are guys who experience same-sex attraction who are never sexually abused
Right.
in any way at all.
Right. Good point. Thank you for clarifying that.
Sure.
Actually, Garry, let's do this. Let's take another break. And then on the other side of the break, we'll come back to let you minister what the healing process looks like.
Great.
All right. Thank you for joining us.